A.11 complex numbers. Please take the time to read the gray boxes. You will find everything you need to know about complex numbers. Let's start with the first gray box. A plus bi is a complex number, where a is the real part of the complex number and b is the imaginary part. Now, to add or subtract complex numbers, we add or subtract the real parts and we add or subtract the imaginary parts. For example, let's say we had 3 plus 4i plus 7 plus 2i. 3, and if you look at this as one complex number and this as a separate complex number, we can add 3 and 7 together to get 10. And we can add 4i and 2i together to get 6i. And so our simplified complex number is 10 plus 6i. Next, notice in the next squared box, we need to know this very important fact. I squared is equal to -1. Now, if you square both sides, you will also notice that I is equal to the square root of -1. So that's actually another important fact that you should know. So we'll box that and we'll highlight that as well. And then we'll get to complex conjugates and why they're important. And then we'll also get to dividing complex numbers. But again, please take some time to read these gray boxes. Now, I did add an extra note. Square root of a times square root of b in the real plane is just square root of a times b. Square root of -a times square root of -b, you would think is square root of -8 times -b. But it actually isn't. In the complex plane, we cannot do this. So this is not true. And here's my little skull and bones that you've seen me do in class, so that you do not do this. So how do you multiply square root of -8 times square root of -b? Well, first we need to take out that square root of -1. Now let's go back over here. Square root of -1, if you recall, is I. So this is where I'm looking at right now. So we're going to go back to our problem here, and I'm going to write I square root of a times I square root of b. So I simply took out the negative square root and made it an I, since I know that square root of -1 is I. Now, when we multiply these two together, okay, we can multiply the i's together and we get I squared, and we can multiply the square root of a times the square root of b, and now we get square root of a times b. We can't leave it like this, though. We always want to simplify it. Again, let's go back over here. We know that, and this is where I'm looking at, we know that I squared equals -1. So we're actually going to change that I squared to -1. And we get negative square root of a times b. And that's how we multiply complex numbers if we have square roots. Now let's take a look at the examples I have here. Take some time to do these before you actually look at the answers, so that you know if you're performing the operations correctly. So I'm actually going to leave this for part 2 of our video, so that you have some time to do this entire worksheet. And only after you've read carefully everything that is written in the gray boxes.